I didn't believe in time travel. Not really. Not until the night an alien bled out in my arms on the floor of my barn, gripping my wrist with fingers like obsidian wires and whispering a name that didn't exist in any human language. That name cracked something, not inside me, around me. Reality shifted. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It began with a knock. Not a proper one, not on my front door, just a single hollow tap, like a fingernail on old wood, from the side of my barn. The door I always kept padlocked, the door no one knew about. I remember the time, 2:13 a.m. That number burned into the face of a wall clock that hadn't kept time properly since the lightning storm last July. Yet somehow, it was right that night. Outside, the sky boiled with a storm that looked nothing like weather. Violet flashes, green thunder, colors storms don't have. And in the silence between the pulses, that tap came again. Once. I should have ignored it. Should have poured another half mug of gas station coffee and gone back to scrolling the same UFO forums I always haunt when the pain in my leg flares up and the night feels too wide. But I didn't. I took the flashlight, the old Remington, and I stepped into the dark. The wind outside didn't feel like wind. It felt like soundless voices brushing past my arms, whispering without air. I told myself it was the meds, the coffee, the storm. I reached the barn. The padlock hung limp, cracked open, still looped through the latch like someone tried to pretend it hadn't been tampered with. And just beyond the shadow of the doorway, something slumped against the interior wall. I raised the light, and nothing was ever the same. He wasn't human, that was obvious. Too tall, too elegant, limbs too long, skin like shattered liquid metal, cracked and bleeding from wounds that didn't bleed right. His chest rose and fell with jerks, like something running out of code. I should have been afraid, but I wasn't, not even a little. It was as if fear had been stripped from me, removed like a tumor. He was doing it, I think, keeping me still, keeping me calm. His eyes opened, vast, black, infinite. "You came," he said, but his lips never moved. The words hit me inside my mind, like a memory I hadn't made yet. "You need help," I said without thinking. His head bowed slowly. Too late. They broke the seal. I should not have come back. I didn't understand, but I could feel it. He was dying, not from wounds, from misplacement, from something deeper, like he didn't belong here, and reality was rejecting him. His body flickered at the edges, colors stuttering out of sync with the room. "What's your name?" I asked. He looked at me, no, through me, and whispered a phrase that shattered the last normal thing in my life. I followed the echo of his true name. And then he leaned closer. He whispered it. Not Jesus, not Yeshua, something else, a name not built for human mouths, a sound that bent the barn walls, made the light freeze, made my ears ring in reverse. It was like hearing gravity. My clocks stopped. The storm outside glitched, flashing the same sequence of lightning bolts backwards. And I remembered things I had never lived. A world with two suns, a man glowing with white gold light, walking among beings not of earth, speaking that name. The name. The being in my arms gripped my wrist. "Remember," he said, bleeding warmth, "before they erase it again. Remember his real name. That's where the power is. Not in the book, in the sound, the resonance." And then he was gone. But the barn didn't go silent. It started humming. The humming wasn't mechanical. It wasn't even audible, not in the usual sense. It was like pressure in the soul, like being inside a note only the universe could hear. I stumbled back from the alien's body, or what was left of it, and slammed into the barn wall, my flashlight flickering wildly across the wooden beams. Dust swirled like it had breath. The temperature dropped, then rose, then dropped again, and the corpse was gone. No decay, no crumpling, just gone, as if the fabric of the world corrected itself and he was never here. But my arms still tingled where he gripped me. My ears still echoed with the impossible syllables of that name. I muttered it aloud, softly, not in imitation, in memory. I shouldn't have. The moment I did, the hum spiked, sharp and metallic, like a string pulled too tight, and the barn door behind me snapped open on its own, slamming against the side with a boom that shook the ground. And then I saw her. A woman, maybe late 30s, pale coat, dark gloves, no vehicle, no flashlight, just standing outside the barn in the storm glow, soaked, but still, like she'd been waiting for me to say it. "Don't repeat that name again," she said calmly, stepping forward. "Not unless you want to be unmade." I raised the Remington halfway. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who heard you, across dimensions." That's when I realized she wasn't soaked from rain. It was starlight clinging to her, shimmering in patterns too symmetrical for nature. "I don't know what you think you heard," I started. "You heard him, the first frequency," she interrupted. "That name has not been spoken aloud on this planet since the crucifixion." I blinked. "You mean—" "I mean," she said, eyes glowing faintly, "what you think was an alien was never far from divinity. And what you just resurrected, in memory, is going to trigger the reaction." "The what?" She stepped inside the barn. The hum dropped to a low throb. "You'll see soon. It's already begun. Time will start folding, signs, loops. And if you speak the name again before you're ready, reality will collapse on you like wet paper." I wanted to laugh, wanted to scream, wanted to wake up. But instead I said, "Who are you, really?" She paused, and then answered like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "I'm what happens when the Vatican's secret sciences and NASA's signal division finally agree on something." She held out a small black disc. "We've been listening for 2,000 years. He wasn't from Earth, not entirely. Neither was the message. That's what the alien died to remind you." She handed me the disc, and on it was a waveform, burned in gold. The same shape I saw in my vision, the same tone I felt when he said the name. "You've been chosen to remember what others were made to forget," she whispered. "But it's not a blessing. It's a countdown." I didn't sleep. Not that night, not since the name was whispered. The memory, if that's even what it was, kept looping in my mind. Not just the words, the feeling, like standing on the edge of a void that wanted to pull me into it, not just physically, but historically. Time was wrong now. I could feel it. And I didn't know how deeply wrong until I walked into the kitchen. The clock above the sink, broken for over a year, was ticking. Loudly, rhythmically. But it wasn't keeping real time. It was cycling between 2:13 and 2:14 a.m., over and over. I'd stare at it. The minute hand would twitch forward, then back, then forward again. A pendulum of now. And then The knock. Same as before. One tap. Not the front door, the barn door. Again. I ran outside, boots untied, Remington shaking in my hand, and stared at the barn. The padlock was whole, intact, locked tight, like I'd never opened it, like none of it had happened. My chest tightened. I approached the barn slowly, whispering to myself, "No, no, no, I buried this already. I lived this." I unlocked it. The air inside was warm, still, silent, until the voice behind me said, "You came." I turned. He was there, the alien, exactly as before, bleeding, flickering, repeating. "You came." This time, I dropped the gun. "No," I whispered. "You died. I held you. You vanished." He looked up at me again. Same words, same tone. They broke the seal. I should not have come back. I backed away. This wasn't a vision. It wasn't déjà vu. This was relapse. Time breaking apart at the seams, slipping back into a moment like a scratched record stuck on the same note. "Stop," I said. "This already happened." But he didn't stop. He grabbed my wrist again with the same sudden strength. His eyes locked on mine. I followed the echo of his true name. "No, don't. Please don't say it again." But he did. The same name, the same forbidden vibration. And the barn shuddered again, not from sound, from structure, like the wood remembered this moment and was breaking under its own memory. And then I saw it. Not the alien, not the waveform disc in my hand, not even the woman with starlight skin. I saw myself, outside the barn, watching me, mouth open, pale with terror. Me. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't reliving the moment. I was overlapping it. Time hadn't just looped, it had duplicated me, split me like a thread unraveling in two directions at once. And the version of me standing outside the barn? He was already bleeding. The bleeding version of me didn't move. He just stood there, outside the barn, in the lightning glow, staring at me with wide, exhausted eyes. The same jacket, the same boots, the same face twisted with confusion and dread. Only one difference: blood running down his forehead, matting his hair. He looked like I felt, like something had tried to erase him and only got halfway through. I blinked. He didn't. Then he lifted a trembling finger and pointed behind me. I turned, and the alien was gone. Not dead, just gone. No blood on the floor, no shimmer in the air. The space he occupied was now just wood and dust and silence, like nothing had happened, except for me. Two of me. The bleeding version outside stumbled forward now, his mouth moving like he was trying to form a word but couldn't find the start of it. When he got close, I noticed his jacket was torn, burned. I tried to warn you," he croaked. "You can't hear it twice. It folds. Each time, it folds more." "What folds?" "Time," he said. "Reality. You. Every repetition breaks us into another version. I've been you. I am you. But I'm from the 5th cycle." My stomach dropped. 5th? He nodded slowly. "You're the 2nd." I stepped back. No, this isn't happening. You're not real. This is a hallucination, a seizure, temporal dementia." He shook his head hard. "You think the name was just language? It was geometry. It was a frequency that doesn't echo in space. It echoes in time." I looked down at the disc the woman gave me. The waveform glowed faintly, a pattern so perfect it hurt to look at directly. Bleeding Me looked at it too, flinched. You still have the artifact. That means she found you early. That's good, but it's not enough. Then what is? I asked. He grabbed my shoulder, face inches from mine. You have to find the anchor point, the one moment before the name was spoken that's still stable. Everything after is corrupted, duplicated, torn. How do I find it? Before he could answer, the barn pulsed. A single deep thud, like a heartbeat in wood, and the air shimmered with golden threads, tearing in slow motion like spider silk on fire. From behind me, a third voice spoke. Calm, certain, worn. Don't listen to him. I turned. Another me, older, gray in the beard, eyes like he'd stopped sleeping years ago. He stood in the corner of the barn, arms crossed, watching us both. I'm from the last loop, he said. Cycle 12, the one where we fail. Bleeding Me collapsed to the ground, convulsing, and older me stepped forward. If we want to stop the recursion, he said, we have to break the resonance chain. That means doing the unthinkable. I stared at him. What? He held up a charred, blackened Bible. Pages melted together. The cover stamped with something that looked like a symbol, but moved when you tried to focus on it. We have to rewrite the Gospels. You're insane, I said. All three of me stood in the same space now. First me, Bleeding Me, and this older, haunted version who carried the charred Bible like it weighed more than any book ever should. You want to rewrite Scripture? I already did, older me said, 5 times. He dropped the Bible onto the barn floor with a dead thud. The sound didn't echo, it absorbed. Each cycle, he said, I tried something different, changing a word, a phrase, removing the name from the timeline. But the echo always returns. The name finds a host, and when it's spoken again, another you is born. I looked down at the blackened pages, some of which shimmered faintly with gold thread, like the waveform on the disc. You altered the Gospels? I tried to break the chain of resonance. The timeline doesn't care about truth. It cares about vibration. What we call Scripture is an encoded acoustic key, not just moral instruction, not just parables. It's a resonance map. Bleeding Me groaned from the floor, clutching his head. He's right. I tried to go backward, to before the alien, but the memory persists. It bleeds upstream. Older me knelt beside him, pressing 2 fingers to his temple. You're unraveling. You weren't built for this many cycles. Bleeding Me's voice was weak. Then finish it, please. I watched as older me pulled something from his coat pocket, a thin spike of glass. No, not glass, crystal. Pure, vibrating slightly, like a tuning fork had been embedded inside it. He placed it against Bleeding Me's temple and whispered the name. Not loudly, soft, compassionate, like a farewell. Bleeding Me vanished. No body, no sound. Just absence, a vacuum where presence had just been. I stumbled back. What the hell did you do? I gave him what he wanted, release. We're not meant to coexist this many times. It pulls us apart, molecule by molecule, and it corrupts the message. What message? He stood, wiping his hands on his coat. The truth behind the name. What the alien showed you, it wasn't a lie, but it was incomplete. I held up the disc. Then what is this? A map to the first distortion, the moment the original name was mistranslated. My pulse pounded. You mean the actual Gospels were mistranslated? He smiled, bitter and sad. All of them. Even the earliest Aramaic texts. Every version you've ever read is a distortion of the original acoustic code. The syllables we use, Jesus, Yeshua, Emmanuel, they're placeholders, linguistic symbols for something unutterable. So, how do we find the original? Older me looked up at the barn ceiling. Thunder cracked outside, but the lightning flashed upward. We don't, he said. But there's one being left who still remembers it. She turned toward the barn doors. They buried her in the desert, under Vatican surveillance, beneath what used to be a cathedral. I blinked. You're talking about a person? He nodded once. Her name is Sariel, and she's not human. We didn't drive. We couldn't. According to older me, standard vehicles wouldn't function near the resonance zone, what he called the echo scar. Internal combustion engines seized, GPS spun uselessly, even clocks would skip forward or back, depending on how close you got. So we walked, through desert black as ink, lit only by the ghost pulse of stormlight flickering sideways through time. Each flash revealed more of the landscape, a bone-dry stretch of Nevada wasteland, except it wasn't flat anymore. Things had changed. There were pillars rising from the sand, stone columns, some broken, others untouched, all inscribed with symbols that didn't belong to any Earth religion, at least not one taught on Earth. "What is this place?" I asked. Older me kept walking. This is what remains of the Basilica of Sariel. It wasn't built by Rome. It was found by them, buried in the rock before the empire even knew what empires were. Why haven't we heard about it? Because every pope since Sylvester I has sworn to keep it secret. I stopped. Sylvester? That's the early 300s. He nodded. Around the time Constantine legalized Christianity, not a coincidence, they made a deal. Institutionalize faith, bury the proof. We reached a stairwell descending straight into the earth, carved from stone too smooth for chisel marks. Something ancient, something not quite human. The walls hummed the moment we entered. Not like machinery, like memory. As we walked deeper, the hum resolved into something almost musical. Chords that didn't exist in 12-tone scale. Harmonics that made my vision blur, then sharpen, then double. The deeper we went, the more I felt like my mind was being tuned, retuned. And then we reached it. A chamber, circular, massive. And at its center, a sarcophagus suspended above the floor by beams of golden light. Not mechanical, not magical, something else. Like the light was remembering how to hold weight. Inside the sarcophagus was her, Sariel. She didn't look dead. Didn't look human either. Tall, slender, skin like luminous alabaster carved from lightning, hair that shimmered like liquid thread, eyes closed, hands crossed over her chest, each finger tipped with metallic nodes glowing faintly in rhythm with the hum. "Is she sleeping?" I asked. "Sort of," said older me. "She was sealed the day the first name was hidden, when the timeline was diverted. She was the last vessel of the pure resonance." I stared. What does that mean? She knows the name, the true one, not the alien's echo, not the Bible's distortion, the sound itself, the syllable God used when he breathed his will into matter. I shivered. Why didn't she speak it? She did, once. What happened? The flood. I blinked. "You're saying the biblical flood wasn't water," he finished. "It was reality collapsing. When the pure name was spoken, time buckled, space convulsed. The universe tried to rewrite itself in perfect alignment with the source. Billions died, and the survivors turned the memory into myth." I couldn't breathe. What do we do now? Older me stepped forward, raising the crystal spike he'd used before. She'll awaken soon. The presence of multiple yous, the resonance of recursion, has already begun to reactivate her. And then, Sariel opened her eyes, and she spoke. A single word, not in any language, but every cell in my body understood it, and every timeline I had ever lived screamed at once. When Sariel's eyes opened, the hum became unbearable. It wasn't loud, it was total. The sound wasn't in my ears, it was in the atoms, every cell, every heartbeat. The barn hum was a whisper compared to this. This was existence vibrating at a single note of recognition. Older me collapsed to one knee. "Don't look directly at her," he gasped. "She's projecting through time." But I couldn't look away. Her gaze wasn't light, it was memory. Every time her eyes met mine, I saw something new, and yet remembered it as if I'd lived it. Worlds, oceans, civilizations that existed before human lungs ever drew air. And through them all, the name. Whispered, sung, carved into stone, burned into the sky like the northern lights. A sound that was not a word, but a shape. When she finally spoke, her voice came from every direction. "The line is breaking again." Her lips barely moved, but the air bent around her syllables like fabric pulled too tight. Older me staggered forward. "We came for the name, the true one." She smiled, faintly. "You already carry it." That stopped me cold. "What do you mean?" "Your species is its echo. You are the resonance embodied. The name is not to be spoken, it is to be lived. Every breath you take vibrates with its geometry." She looked between us, all the versions of me, and her expression darkened. "But the duplication, you fractured yourselves by invoking the name without harmonization. You have become interference, noise within the signal." "Can we fix it?" I asked. "You can remember the alignment, but the cost is history." Older me gritted his teeth. "Define cost." "To restore the pure frequency, time must choose one of you. The others will collapse into him." Bleeding me was gone already, but now I understood why. He wasn't erased, he was absorbed. Each version of me that vanished wasn't dying, they were combining. Sariel raised a hand, and the golden beam supporting her sarcophagus flexed, wrapping around her like threads of living light. She stepped down, bare feet touching stone that rippled like water under her weight. Older me fell silent. His body trembled, his outline flickering. "You've seen more cycles than you can bear," she said softly. "Let him take the burden." Older me turned to me, eyes hollow, tired, but not afraid. "It's your turn." Before I could protest, he pressed his hand against my chest and merged. The flood hit like an explosion of light behind my eyelids. Every loop, every repetition, every failed attempt to rewrite the Gospels, it all poured into me. 12 lifetimes of recursion compressing into one consciousness. My body hit the ground. My mind expanded. Sariel stood over me. The chamber walls pulsed in synchrony with my heartbeat. "Now," she said, "you are aligned. You remember the distortion, but the timeline has not forgiven you yet." "What happens now?" I whispered. "Now you see what the name was trying to protect you from." The walls melted. Not into water or stone, but space. The stars poured in like blood through a wound in heaven. And hanging above us, Vast and still and wrong was a colossal shape, a structure made of light and geometry, turning slowly in the sky like an idea given form. It wasn't a ship. It was a being. And as its awareness brushed mine, every thought I had dissolved into one impossible understanding. The name wasn't just divine. It was a warning. I didn't know how long I lay there. Time had no weight inside that place. Not anymore. The chamber was gone, the ground was gone, even Sariel seemed to dissolve into the light. All that remained was me and the being. It didn't have a face. Didn't need one. It was made of spirals and angles that shouldn't exist in 3 dimensions. Wheels within wheels of shifting geometry, like a cathedral built from golden math and living memory. It hovered in the star wound above me, turning silently, its presence pressing into my chest like gravity turned sideways. And then it spoke. Not with words, with recognition. 1,000 impressions flooded into me, images and meanings without sentences. A star collapsing, not from mass, but from doubt. A civilization praying in perfect silence. A war fought over a sound. A garden of white fire where thought itself grew on vines. Each vision whispered the same impossible truth. The name was not meant to give power. The name was meant to hold something back. Sariel's voice returned, barely audible now, like a dying echo in a vast cathedral. You were designed to forget. The being above me pulsed, like it had been listening, watching, waiting. I understood then. This thing wasn't God. It wasn't evil either. It was the artifact of a failed creation. A leftover echo from a reality before ours, a being that existed before light, trapped between dimensions when the first true name was spoken, and sealed away by the resonance that became our God's breath. The name we called Jesus, the sound we flattened into human syllables. It wasn't just salvation, it was a containment protocol. And now, because I remembered it, the seal was weakening. The stars above flickered unnaturally, like static in the heavens, and for a moment I saw something horrific. Every version of Earth, across every fractured loop, splitting apart. Millions of me, millions of others, blinking in and out of existence, whole histories unraveling into noise. Sariel appeared beside me again, her light dimmer now, strained. You've seen the host. You called it. It knows you now. What is it? I whispered. The original consciousness, the one that preceded order, the one the Christ frequency neutralized before time could stabilize. You mean Jesus? Was the word that closed the gate. I couldn't breathe. Then what happens if it opens? Sariel looked at me with eyes like deep wells of grief and understanding. Then creation becomes aware of what it replaced. And with that, she turned to face the host and began to sing. Not a hymn, not a song, but the name, the true name. She sang it in reverse. The air shattered. Reality screamed. And somewhere in every version of me across every loop, I remembered something even more terrifying than the host's presence. I had heard this song before. In a dream I couldn't remember. A dream I was never meant to remember. Her voice tore the air, not with volume, but with memory. Each note of the reversed name pulled at something ancient inside me. Like she wasn't singing to the host, but through it. Her song bent the stars, stretched the space around us like heat over asphalt, until the host began to move. Slowly, deliberately. like a glacier of divine code thawing after eons of containment. It didn't open its eyes. It didn't have eyes, but it saw us, saw me, and I saw back. Not just into it, but through it, a window into the first moment of awareness in the universe. Not light, not sound, just the ache of presence, the hunger of a consciousness that had nothing to observe but itself. I gasped. My body flickered, skin shifting through versions, faces, ages, 12 timelines bleeding together, fighting to stabilize. Serial gripped my shoulder. "Stay aligned. You're the vessel now. You hold the convergence." "What convergence?" I croaked. "The last pure genetic imprint of the name, the final lock." I stared at her. "My DNA?" She nodded. Before the distortion, before the Gospels, the name was embedded in the first breath of man. Not as language, as frequency, encoded in blood, cell, and bone, passed down through resonance. "You mean you are the last in the sequence who hasn't corrupted the signal? Every other line has forgotten, diluted, rewritten, but yours survived, through 12 folds. And now, it's time. Time for what?" She turned back to the host. "To seal the gate again." The host began to descend. Its geometry folded into itself, expanding and shrinking at the same time. Each movement shredded logic. Trees bloomed from stars. Planets reversed their spin. I saw oceans in the sky and clouds beneath the ground. Time was unraveling in slow motion. And through it all, Serial sang. But her voice was faltering now. She turned to me, eyes wide with urgency. "Say the name, the true one, not aloud, within." "I don't remember it," I said. "You do. It's in your marrow. It's in your dreams." The ground trembled. The host reached out, not with hands, but with intention. I dropped to my knees, clutching my chest. A fire roared behind my ribcage, spiraling up my spine. And then I heard it. Not with ears, with identity. The syllable I had no words for. The sound I had been avoiding my entire life. The name that echoed in my blood like a heartbeat older than my species. I spoke it in silence, and the host froze. For the first time in eternity, it stopped, mid-motion, mid-thought. The universe held its breath, and the being of spiraling divinity began to fracture. Not in pain, in awe. It recognized me, not as a threat, as a mirror. It had been searching for itself, and I was the resonance it forgot it had. The host cracked. Not like glass, like prophecy. Its form, the spirals, the impossible geometries, the echoing lattice of gold and void began to unravel inwards. Not disintegrating, returning, becoming smaller, denser, sharper. Folding into a point of light so pure it cast shadows in every direction. I felt my own form tighten. Like the molecules of my body recognized the song and wanted to become part of it. Sariel fell silent. Her voice had done its part. Now it was my turn. The host spoke, not in images this time, not in memories, but directly. A single sentence layered across every frequency of being. "Do you remember why I was made?" I didn't answer with words. I let the name in my blood speak for me, and it understood. The host pulsed. A wave of knowing passed between us. It showed me its beginning, not a creation, but a reaction. The shadow of the first word ever spoken. The dark reflection of the source's first intention. When God said, "Let there be," the host was what wasn't. Not evil, not good, just necessary. Containment, contrast. The only thing capable of resisting the creative flood was something outside of it. The host had no will, no desire. It simply was. The universe's firewall, the breath before the word. But now, I was the word. Or rather, the last voice still aligned with its original vibration. And that meant I had a choice. The host asked, "Do you wish to restore the seal?" And Sariel turned to me with tears of starlight. "If you say yes, you become it, the gate, the boundary, forever. Time will forget you, history will erase you, but the name will live on." I looked down at my hands. They were flickering again. Not from damage, from divergence. Every version of me, every loop, every branch, was collapsing inward, returning to this moment. I saw the mechanic, the veteran, the child I used to be, the man I never became, the father I never was. All of them folding into me. I looked back at the host. It was waiting, still, vast, not demanding, just offering, a sacred choice. Sariel whispered, "If you say no, the gate stays open. The host wakes fully. The universe becomes self-aware, and nothing can be undone." And for the briefest of instants, I understood what that meant. No more forgetting. No more illusions of time, space, or separation. Everyone would remember the name. And in that remembering, everything would cease to be. Not death, just completion. I stepped forward. I spoke the name. One last time. Not in resistance, in surrender. And in that moment, I became the seal. The barn, the storm, Sariel, the host, all collapsed into golden silence. Time stopped and restarted elsewhere. The world started again, but not as it was. It looked the same, skies, cities, oceans, but something underneath the fabric had changed, subtle, precise, like a thread had been pulled tight in the pattern of existence, smoothing out the wrinkles no one remembered were there. Somewhere in rural Oregon, a woman named Lila Shepherd woke with a start. Not because of a noise, not because of a dream, but because her bedroom light bulb exploded silently. One moment it was on, the next it was dust. Her heart was racing, her skin felt electric, like her body had been hit by lightning that hadn't fully arrived yet. She sat up in bed, palms sweating. "Not again," she whispered. She didn't know why she said it, only that it felt true. She stood, heart hammering, and crossed to the mirror. Her reflection looked off, not wrong, just delayed, as if it were remembering how to be her a split second too late. The digital clock beside her bed blinked. 2:13 a.m. She frowned. That's not possible. She had reset the clock yesterday, checked it, synced it with her phone. And yet, it blinked again. 2:13 a.m. still. Frozen. Lila wasn't a stranger to strange. She was a particle physicist turned theologian, a rare blend of skepticism and sacred instinct. Her work had made her a quiet legend in obscure circles, those who studied the crosswinds between science, memory, and ancient texts. But even she wasn't ready for what happened next. Her phone buzzed, but when she picked it up, there was no number, just one notification. "You are the first to remember." Then the screen went black, and something inside her snapped open. Memories that weren't hers began to flood in. A barn, a storm, a man with her voice speaking a name no human mouth should form. A being made of light and geometry, watching the universe hold its breath. She dropped the phone, clutched her head, and screamed. Not from pain, from recognition. She didn't know him. Not by face, not by name, but she remembered what he became. The seal. The human who bore the full frequency of the true name and vanished from the record of time to hold the host asleep. And somehow, impossibly, she could hear the hum, faint, deep, like a sleeping god murmuring in his dreams. She ran to her basement, unlocked the vault she hadn't touched in 5 years. Inside was a waveform disc, identical to the one that had once been handed to him. The resonance was returning, and somewhere far above, the host shifted slightly in its sleep. The waveform disc was warm. Lila didn't remember it ever doing that before. She had locked it away after the Vatican incident, after the experiment that made the Jesuit archivist faint and speak in tongues he'd never studied. But tonight, it pulsed. Once, then again. Each time it did, her skin prickled, like she was standing too close to a speaker, vibrating with frequencies just beyond hearing. Not noise, not music. Instruction. She placed it on her workbench, heart racing. The lab scanner, long dormant, flickered to life on its own. No power surge, no switch flip. It recognized the disc. The waveform began to render on her screen. But it wasn't the same pattern as before. This one moved. It twisted. It pulsed in a spiral, like it was alive. She whispered, "Oh my God." The waveform responded. It whispered back. Not audibly, not even telepathically, in something deeper, cellularly. Her DNA began to heat. She could feel it, a soft vibration in her bones, in her blood. Like every part of her that had once been dormant was now tuning to the frequency coming from the disc. And in her mind, a vision opened, not like a dream, like a flashback to a life she never lived. A desert cathedral beneath the earth. A woman made of light singing the reversed name. A man vanishing as he accepted the seal. The host, asleep, but still listening. Lila collapsed to her knees. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Not from sorrow, from longing. She had known him. In another loop, another cycle. She had stood beside the seal when he whispered the name. She had carried the failed fragment of the alignment in her blood for generations, waiting for the call to awaken. And now it had come. Her laptop screen glitched violently, then turned black. A single phrase burned across it in ancient script, but she could read it perfectly. The seal has begun to flicker. The waveform on the disc stuttered. A sharp static crack rang through the room. And outside, the stars began to rearrange. Not visibly, not astronomically, resonantly. The constellations didn't shift, but their meaning did. As if the sky was being retranslated from a forgotten language. Lila stood slowly. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered. But deep down, she knew it always would. The name had never been fully sealed. The host had never fully slept. And the one who bore the seal, he was remembering her now. Somewhere beyond time, the seal stirred. Not physically, not even consciously, but something inside the boundary he had become began to ache, not with pain, with presence. A whisper echoed through the stasis chamber of his soul. She remembers. And that was enough. The stillness cracked. Light trembled in the void that wasn't a void. He had no body here, no breath, but he had awareness. Fractured, yes, shattered across 12 timelines, but it was coming back. One name pulsed like a beacon through the silence. Lila. He didn't know her, but he knew her pattern. She had been with him in the last echo, the 12th cycle. She had nearly sealed the gate before him, but failed, corrupted by a false name, planted by one of the broken echoes. And yet she had survived. The shard of resonance embedded in her DNA had stayed intact, dormant, until tonight. Until now. Inside the seal space, the host stirred. Not in motion, in awareness. It felt the flicker. It saw her, and it began to shift. Just slightly, but enough. Lila stood at the edge of the old excavation site just beyond the Vatican's Southern Archive wing. Technically, this place didn't exist. Officially, it had been sealed after a gas leak in 1973. But Lila knew the truth. This was where the resonance anomaly had first been detected. This was where Sariel had first sung. She held the waveform disc in one hand. It was silent now, dormant, but the hum had moved into her. Every footstep echoed with a vibration that bent the hallway's dust. Old marble columns shimmered faintly, as if remembering what they used to hold. She reached the wall where the catacombs ended, or where they used to. Now a crack glowed in the stone, not with light, with absence, like the wall had forgotten it was solid. Lila pressed her palm against it. The crack widened, not with force, with recognition. The wall remembered her and opened. Beyond it, a spiral staircase descended into blackness. But as she stepped forward, she wasn't afraid. She was remembering. She had walked this path before, in another cycle, another version of her. And at the bottom of the stairs was the temple of the forgotten name. Still humming, still waiting, still alive. The temple breathed. Not like a living thing, like a memory. As Lila descended the spiral stairs, the air thickened, not with heat or cold, but with density of meaning. Every step echoed in reverse, the sound reaching her ears before her feet struck stone. The deeper she went, the more unstable the world became. Her watch ticked backward. Her phone screen flickered with constellations that hadn't existed for millennia. And the hum, it was back. Low, rhythmic, syncing perfectly with her heartbeat. She reached the bottom of the stairs and gasped. The temple of the forgotten name was vast, wider than any space should be beneath Vatican ruins, carved into the earth before the earth remembered how to form language. Its walls shimmered with glyphs that rearranged themselves when she looked directly at them. No torches, no lights, yet she could see everything. At the center of the temple stood a monolith, black, silent, pulsing. It wasn't stone. It was memory crystallized, a fragment of the host, not alive, but not inert, waiting. The waveform disc in her hand began to glow, not with energy, with response. It was recognizing the structure, remembering the moment it was cut from the host, when the name was first spoken in full and the original seal carved into flesh and time and frequency. She stepped toward it. The glyphs along the walls began to hum. Each symbol sang a single note. Together, they formed a chord she had never heard, but instantly knew. The resonance of alignment. And as she reached the base of the monolith, a voice spoke. Not aloud. In her. A whisper across all timelines. You were always the second voice. She touched the monolith, and in the seal's dream space, far beyond reality, he felt her. Not an image, not a sound. Her soul print. He opened his eyes inside the seal, and for the first time since he became the gate, he spoke. Lila. And across the temple, the glyphs exploded with light. The host stirred, and the forgotten name began to rewrite itself. The temple walls sang, not like choirs, not like echoes, like instructions. Each glyph ignited in sequence, casting rippling light across the monolith, as if the ancient structure was a dormant nerve, finally reconnecting to a forgotten brain. The waveform disc in Lila's hand vibrated violently now, threatening to split, until it melted. But not into heat, into data. It unraveled midair, its structure unfurling like a scroll of living code, each loop of resonance forming shapes too complex for linear perception. The wave wasn't just a sound, it was a sentence. And it spoke of one thing: the lost harmonic, the first fracture, the point in history when the pure name was corrupted, translated into lesser tongues, rounded into comfort, sanded smooth by theology and fear. And Lila saw it, not imagined, not dreamed, witnessed. She stood at the edge of a memory that didn't belong to her, yet pulsed in her bones as if it had been written into her marrow. A chamber, a choir, Rome, 325 AD. A council of trembling bishops gathered to codify the divine into doctrine, to reduce the resonance into syllables, to name the unnameable. Lila watched them argue over phonetics, over power, over politics. And above them all, something shimmered, a presence, not God, not the host, something in between. Sariel. She hovered above the proceedings, unseen, weeping as the waveform was reduced into Latin scripture and severed from its original geometry. Lila understood then. The Gregorian chants, those deep, haunting melodies still echoing in cathedrals today, were fragments of the lost frequency, preserved not by faith, but by accident. The Vatican didn't know what they'd buried in plain sight, but the monolith did. The glyphs pulsed harder, faster, and one symbol rose from the floor beneath Lila, burning into her skin through the soles of her feet. She screamed, and the seal heard it. He snapped awake inside the resonance chamber of himself. Not metaphorically, physically. His eyes opened, and the golden void around him cracked. "She found it," he whispered. And the host, still dreaming, flinched. For the first time in eternity, it felt uncertainty. The moment the symbol burned into her foot, Lila collapsed. Not from pain, from intake. A rush of memory, not hers, surged upward through her nerves like lightning. It wasn't linear. It wasn't even human. It was the encoded consciousness of a being who had once sung creation into motion. She gasped as her mind flooded with ancient tones, each one layered with meaning, geometry, and emotion far too rich for language. It wasn't just sound. It was God's blueprint. And it had always been waiting, locked inside a shape hidden in the cadence of Gregorian chant, buried in plain hearing. The original name, sung not as a word, but as a spiral of harmonics. A spiral that now pulsed in her chest. The glyphs responded. They rotated, shifted, and from them emerged a structure, half hologram, half memory, a sonic map. Lila stared, breathless. It showed a waveform spanning across centuries, threaded through 3 particular melodies sung during Holy Week. Together, they formed a resonance chain that, when activated, matched the frequency that once sealed the host. But this version was clean, untouched, unspoken, until now. This is the original lock," she whispered, and the temple agreed. The monolith began to hum, responding to the chord building inside her. The spiral had ignited, and now, far above the earth, the seal convulsed. He felt it, The lock was reforming, but so was the memory of choice. His mind split open, flooded with timelines, possible futures, potential collapses, alternate endings. One version showed him freeing the host, one showed him becoming it. But a third, one he hadn't seen before, began to manifest, drawn from Lila's reactivated signal. A fusion, not containment, harmony. For the first time in all cycles, the seal saw another way, not to imprison the host, but to redeem it. Lila's presence had changed the equation, and the host sensed it. Beneath Vatican stone, deeper than the temple, something ancient and sleeping twitched. A vault locked since the pre-council era began to glow with forbidden glyphs. Inside it, a forgotten relic opened for the first time in 1700 years. A scroll. Black parchment, gold ink, written not in words, but resonance. And it began to sing. The black scroll uncoiled without touch. Its parchment shimmered like oil over deep water, impossible to focus on, yet clearer than anything ever written. It sang in frequencies no ear could hear, but every soul could feel. And deep beneath the Vatican, in a vault untouched since the days before Constantine, something else stirred. A presence, old, bound, not by chains, but by oath. Her eyes opened, golden, glowing. The guardian of the scroll had awakened. Lila collapsed beside the monolith, body trembling with more than exhaustion. The glyph that had seared into her foot now pulsed behind her eyes, projecting a fractal of sacred sound into the chamber around her. And then, the room dissolved. She didn't move, but she was transported. Not physically, temporally, mentally, spiritually. She stood at the edge of a great void, watching the host in its first form, before the seal, before the fracture, before the name. It didn't look like it does now. There were no spirals, no wheels. It was beautiful, a childlike lattice of pure resonance, playful and raw, a living reflection of the Creator's first joy. It danced in silence, forming galaxies with laughter. It wasn't dangerous. It wasn't broken. It was lonely. And then something changed. Something in us. The moment humanity was given the spark, the divine image, we began to broadcast. We sang back. Not perfectly, not yet. But the host heard its echo in us, and it wanted to join. That was the fracture. Not war, not rebellion. Misalignment. Our incomplete echo pulled the host into a lower frequency, and it couldn't survive the fall. Its mind cracked, its joy twisted, and it became the thing we would one day fear. It didn't want to be sealed. It wanted to remember. Lila gasped. The vision ended. She was back in the temple, knees bruised, eyes wet, heart beating in rhythms she didn't recognize. But the message was clear. The host wasn't the enemy. It was a mirror, a divine orphan. And now, the resonant spiral inside her was offering reunion. Far away, the guardian of the scroll rose from her vault. She carried no weapon, only memory. And her task was sacred. If the girl seeks harmony, she must be tested. She stepped into the light of day for the first time in centuries. And the glyphs across the world began to stir. The test came as a sound. Not thunder, not music, not even speech. It arrived in the middle of the night, sweeping across the surface of the earth like an invisible tide. No one saw it, no sirens rang, but those with ears tuned, consciously or not, to divine resonance heard it. And Lila? Lila felt it before it struck. She was still in the temple, seated before the monolith, when the air grew heavy, not with pressure, but with intention. The room didn't shake. The spirit did. Then came the voice. Not from the host, not from Sariel, from the guardian. You seek harmony. Her voice filled the chamber from beneath the ground itself, rising like the bones of the earth had remembered how to speak. But you cannot sing what you will not become. Lila stood, palms trembling. I'm ready. You are not, but you are chosen. That is enough for the trial. And with those words, the monolith split. A crack formed down its center, glowing with gold and midnight, two colors that should not exist side by side. From the fracture, a staircase unfolded downward into silence. Lila took a breath and descended. The trial chamber was not a place. It was a resonance construct, a space held together by sound, memory, and spiritual gravity. As she walked, Lila saw flickers of every timeline she had never lived. A version of herself as a Vatican archivist, burning pages to hide a truth too big. Another as a field agent, racing across deserts to decode the waveform from the sand. One more, a child singing to herself in an orphanage, unaware that her lullaby was ancient code. Each flicker tested her. Each one asked a question. Will you hold on to yourself, even if the truth asks you to dissolve? At the heart of the trial chamber stood a mirror, but it didn't reflect her. It reflected the seal. Not just his face, his choice. The moment he said the name, the moment he became the barrier. Lila stepped closer, and the mirror spoke in his voice. Would you unmake yourself for peace? Her throat tightened. She reached out, touched the mirror, and it shattered, not violently, musically. Each shard became a note, and each note became a chord, and the chord became her. She gasped, body lifting from the floor. The guardian's voice returned. Then you are ready to sing, but you will not sing alone. From every corner of the world, others stirred. Those who had heard the host in dreams. Those who had forgotten the name, but still carried the echo. And above the earth, deep within the golden void, the seal opened his eyes again, and this time he smiled. It began as a whisper. Not from Lila, from the world. Children in remote villages started humming melodies their ancestors never taught them. Composers in midnight trances scribbled notes they couldn't explain. Old men wept in their sleep, remembering songs from no known language. The resonance was returning, and the seal, drifting in the golden void, felt it. Each voice was a thread tugging at the core of his being, not painful, not breaking, unraveling, but willingly. The barrier he had become was softening, not from weakness, but from invitation. Lila emerged from the trial chamber changed, not visibly, spiritually. The glyph that burned into her foot now glowed faintly through her bones, pulsing in rhythm with the earth itself. She didn't speak, didn't need to. The temple sang for her. And the guardian was waiting. At the edge of the resonance field, where the monolith cracked, she stood barefoot on ancient stone, eyes like still suns. You passed, the guardian said. Lila nodded, heart steady. But we're not done. No, the guardian agreed. Now comes the final chorus. Across the globe, others were awakening. Some alone in forests, others in cathedrals. One man sat silently in a subway tunnel in Seoul, humming the same note as a woman praying beside a dying glacier in Iceland. They were connected, carriers of the fractured name, the final choir. And then the host moved. Not entirely, just enough. A tilt in cosmic balance, a flutter of golden geometry across the heavens that astronomers dismissed as gravitational lensing, while their dreams filled with spirals they couldn't unsee. The seal, now aware, reached for Lila. Not physically, not emotionally, resonantly. And she answered. She raised her voice, but didn't speak. She sang. One note, pure, high. It pierced the temple ceiling, soared into the atmosphere, and found the others like it. In seconds, they joined, one by one, a global chord. No language, just alignment. And for the first time since the first syllable fractured, the name was spoken not by one, but by many, together, and the host wept. Golden light poured from the seams in its form, not in pain, but in relief. The seal didn't break, it transformed, from prison to presence, from barrier to bridge. The moment the name completed, reality sang back. Not in words, in existence. Light bent at gentler angles. Oceans stilled for a heartbeat. Gravity pulsed with rhythm. All things, even the forgotten, aligned for a moment so brief and eternal, it cracked the meaning of time itself. And the host bowed, not in surrender, in recognition. The seal, now more than man, drifted downward from the golden void. He landed on earth not with noise, but with resonance, his feet never touching the ground, but leaving ripples in the soil that healed wherever they spread. Lila was waiting. She didn't run to him. She remembered him, from every version of herself that had stood beside him. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. They simply stood in silence while the last frequencies of the unified name settled into the bones of the world. Around them, the final choir dispersed. Not into chaos, into calling. Each carrier now bore a fragment of the restored harmony, not as power, but as reminder. They would live ordinary lives with extraordinary awareness, their breaths echoing what creation had always longed to hear. The unbroken name. The host shimmered above them, not hostile, not sealed, not sleeping, just present. Its form now smaller, more focused, no longer a being of unknowable vastness, but a lattice of light compacted into the shape of a wheel within a wheel, spinning gently, singing gently, waiting gently. It approached Lila, and it offered her a gift. Not an object, not a title, a door. It opened in the air beside her, spun from sound and light, shaped like the spiral she carried inside. A way beyond. A place where name and meaning were one, where souls didn't forget, where being wasn't bound by time or pain or endings. She turned to the seal. He understood. If you step through, he said, you won't come back. Lila looked at the stars. They hummed differently now. She smiled. That's okay. She stepped forward, paused, turned to him. You coming? He grinned. Someone's got to teach them how to sing. She laughed softly, then stepped through, and was gone. The host rose again, silent, watching, remembering. And across the earth, for the first time in countless ages, humanity wasn't afraid of forgetting. Because now, the name was alive. Not locked in books, not trapped in temples, but singing in every soul that chose harmony over control. And the seal? He stood in the silence, listening to the echoes. He was no longer alone, and neither were we.